Well, hey.
Here I am.
Yeah. I will say, as I say it.
Cannot hear you though.
You can't hear me. You can't hear me?
I can hear you through the wall. Wait, try again.
Is this better?
Yeah, because I had my thing on mute. My
Okay.
system was muted.
So I will say, as a heads up, we're before the start of the session yet, so no one is here. Folks are in the waiting room. However, we are live on YouTube streaming now. I don't imagine many people are just popping in, but things that we say and do now are on YouTube.
Okay. So do we want to test the sharing of my?
Sure. Hey, Tyler.
Hello.
Tyler, this is Carol. Carol, this is Tyler. Tyler's on staff with the conference.
Hi, Tyler. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Wishing we were in Pittsburgh.
Oh, I know. We were so looking forward to it. We had like restaurants planned out, everything. I mean, we were ready to go. My wife was going to get to go with me, so it was going to be really cool.
And Tyler has been sort of our chief on the technology side of things. So I'm sure he, of all people, wishes we were in Pittsburgh because we have been trying to figure out all kinds of things.
Yeah, well,
It's been a learning process.
Yeah, it has. All right, so Carol, looks like your screen sharing is coming through for me just fine.
Yep.
and it looks good.
Looks
Yeah, it
good.
does.
Looks good. Yep, yep. So let's see. And let me give it just a minute before I check in with staff related to some general instructions. I'm going to post a quick note to those in the waiting room to hang tight. Right. So Tyler, did I hear right from the other session recently, you've made the move over to Kennesaw, is that right?
Yeah, well, I'm physically in Texas right now, but I will be heading over there. I officially started with Kennesaw on Monday.
Okay, how's everything going?
Good so far. There's a lot of they're really trying to amp up their research. They want to get tenured faculty submitting more grants, so they wanted to bring somebody in to help people, especially with the statistics side of things, to get things that actually make sense and make sure their methodology is sound and those sorts of things. So that's what I'm coming in as, is kind of a free floater to help anywhere I can. What I'm getting the feel of is my postdoctoral mentor there is just running around the campus saying, "Quant guy, I've got a quant guy. It's a quant guy over here." And so I'm working with an anthropologist next week, which is really exciting. They wanted to do some statistics and had no idea how to do it. So
yeah,
A quant guy, I love that.
Interestingly, that's kind of how I started doing this with Carol.
it's not the same.
You're surprised how valuable a quant guy is.
Apparently. Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm hopefully going to talk to Tom sometime in the future just to get an insider's opinion.
Yeah. What is the like office or entity that you work in there? Because I know it's a big institution.
So it's a part of the Office of Research. So and it's kind of a new sort of thing. So they're what you would call maybe like an emerging R2. And so they don't really know what their identity is in terms of research versus teaching right now. So teaching's still a really valued component there, obviously, but they sort of want to amp up that other side. Yeah. And so they're what my boss is, she's the dean of strategic research and planning, and her job right now, or her mission, is to create a transdisciplinary program that all sort of circles around health. And so so part of my job will be being that glue between different parts of the university. I don't know if glue is the right word, or facilitator, whatever it is. Yeah.
No, that's good though. I mean,
I'm excited.
As I'm sure Carol knows, my having been local, I heard quite about this. There's a very robust Center for Teaching at Kennesaw, large, big staff. They're doing a lot of work down there.
It's a big,
yeah. It seemed like a lot of social stuff coming out of there as well.
Yep. And Carol, so Tom Pusateri, the individual Tyler mentioned, is the executive director of this organization. He used to be at their center. I think he was like director of SOTL, or I'm not sure exactly what their title, what title he had, but so that's a big link that our group has had to Kennesaw. All right, so let's see. Let me check in just as a reminder, as I pointed out. Though our recording has not started yet, we are live on YouTube streaming. Fortunately, no one has anything regrettable, so that's good news.
Darn, maybe that will liven things up a bit.
So everyone, this is my colleague, Carol. Carol, this is most of the staff that works with me. And by the way, Carol is through the wall here. She's on that side of the wall.
Oh,
yeah, we could walk out and have coffee with each other.
Right. If I had a hole in the wall, I could pass things through it. So that said, I thought we got a couple of minutes till we begin. And I do want to point out as a reminder that for this session, I have to depart about halfway.
Carol is through the. Sorry.
Oh, you must have the YouTube live stream going.
I did click on YouTube just to.
Gotcha.
Make sure everything was okay.
About halfway through, I have to depart to engage in a mid-semester feedback session. Carol and I are the only individuals doing those, and Carol is busy at this time. So that said, any of you want to serve officially as host of this? Just feel free to jump on in. Who'd like the honor? I mean, everyone can be a co-host as well.
I can do it. It's fine.
Lindsay's got it.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Sure.
I plan on doing, if we have time, 3 short breakouts.
Okay.
Where I'd like, I want really small breakouts, like 2 to 3 people.
Okay. And then you said, so you want to go out into breakouts and then come back to the main room?
Yep.
Up to 3 times. And do you want the same groups every time, or do you want the groups to shuffle every time?
It's probably okay if it's the same groups.
Okay.
It makes it easier, I know, on the Zoom end.
Well, yeah, but whatever your learning goal is, it may be related to getting new ideas, so we can make it work either way. But
no, I think in fact the learning goal might be that someone else already knows part of their story. I mean, ideally I'd like groups of 2, but I don't know how well we could pull that off. I know that sometimes that leaves like one person. Well, I'll leave it to you.
Okay.
The smaller the groups, the better, without it just being one person by themselves in a group.
Got it.
And I'll be watching the clock. I'll get a sense of whether or not I can pull off all 3.
Okay.
We'll see. I could do the last one as a chat as opposed to a breakout if I had to.
Okay.
Is there anything else? So Lindsay will be serving as host. Let's see, Tyler, would you mind watching, or at least having off to the side YouTube on mute, just to see if anyone decides to put a chat in there or anything like that? I can record this. Meeting, but I guess I will just close it. No, I have to close the Zoom. So I guess I'm wondering, Lindsay, are you able to record, or does that have to stay entirely with me because I'm the?
I don't know. I have the button resume recording right now available to me. So
okay. My hope is that if you start that, resume it when the time comes, that it will then save to my Zoom account, so that we can hang on to the file and make it an on-demand thing later. But I have to leave and take my computer with me when I go. So fingers crossed that's going to work in the way I expect.
I can actually, there's a selection for me to record on this computer.
Okay.
And so
you should do it.
Maybe maybe I just do that and then I can upload it to YouTube.
Let's go ahead and do that. Sure.
I like that, because I am notorious for, in my own workshops, like forgetting to unpause after breakout rooms and then awkwardly having to edit my video saying, sorry for viewers at home that are missing these 15 minutes of yeah. So that'd be great, Tyler.
Okay, I'll try.
All right. That's all that comes to mind for me. Like I said, I'll depart, right around the half-hour point. Are there any other questions or thoughts that we have before we begin?
Oh, I need to. I'm glad I tested this. You have to give me permission to record, Lindsay.
I do. Got it. Okay, let me scroll. What do you think that would be called? Because it's not called permission to record.
So as soon as I gave you host status, Lindsay, I believe
Yep.
Tyler, I no longer have capability to make him co-host. Can you make him a co-host?
Maybe.
Oh yeah, maybe that's it.
Yep, y'all aren't listed as, I'm just gonna make all of you co-hosts that are in here.
All right.
Oops, it'll take a minute.
There's people coming.
They're coming.
Oh, there's 50 in the waiting room right now. Yeah. Oops, no, I don't want to do that.
All righty. See that Tyler's a co-host.
Yes, and I can record.
You can. Cool.
Okay. I'm gonna stop this
All right.
one.
Well, let's see. What do you think? Should we admit the room?
I think so.
And then say like we'll start in like 1 or 2 minutes.
Jordan, are you still going to introduce her though, since she's
I will provide a very brief introduction, but I want to maximize time. But yes.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, I'll let him in. Let's go ahead and begin recording.
Alrighty.
All righty, welcome everyone. Folks are joining our room. I'll give us another 1 or 2 minutes before we begin, so get settled. Thank you all for joining us. Appreciate you making time in the middle of the week. Feels weird to have a conference for 1 hour blocks of time in the middle of a week, but here we are. We'll start just a couple of seconds. I'm seeing in the chat that Allison loves the format, 1 hour a day. And if you're available in the evenings for our drink and discuss sessions, they're also great. All right, well, let's go ahead and begin. Some other individuals may file in, but we'll bring them right back into the presentation space. Welcome everyone to our Wednesday keynote session with my friend and colleague, Carol Hurney, who serves as Colby College's Associate Provost for Faculty Development and the founding director of the Center for Teaching and Learning here. My boss and friend. I'm truly quite excited to have her here, to have her involved, you know, in my preparation and getting ready for ACT this year, virtual ACT. It occurred to me, with this being my last year in this role as director, that I gotta use up my people. I got to bring my people. I have one last chance to bring my people to the conference. And I was so pleased to have Carol join us. She's had many years as a professor in the field of biology, as an educational developer, a director of Centers for Teaching and Learning. And I think will bring us lots of interesting ideas. And so without further delay, let me just directly hand it over to Carol. We're very excited. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank all of you for coming. And I so wish we could be face-to-face. It's my preferred mode, as is probably the case for many of you. But I'm really also glad that you're going to be a part of sort of talking about this idea that I've been chewing on for a little while, this idea that I'm calling big teaching. The title that I gave Jordan was Transformative Practices from the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, but I really wanted the title to be something like Diaries of the CTL Director. The things I wish faculty would do that maybe they're just sort of not quite getting to. And so this keynote is really an opportunity for you to think big about your teaching. And this the slide shows an image of some skyscrapers, and I don't want you to build big courses or necessarily teach big courses. I want you to look up and aspire to something really transformative for you and your students. And I'm going to probably be talking about some things that you've heard about in the past, but I'm going to try to wrap it into a process that is not something you're going to do over a weekend, or you're going to finish during this session. It is something that I hope I seed within you. And being a biologist, I could talk a lot about how seeds work, and they may sit there for quite a while. I'm often really amazed by the seeds that live in Walmart inside of little bags for months and months and months, yet you can take them out later on and put them into dirt and give water to them, and then they grow. So my idea is really to think about teaching in terms of a paradigm shift. Big teaching for me is not a way of downplaying some of the other ways that we've been thinking about teaching, most notably the wonderful books that were written by James Lang and Flower Darby on small teaching strategies. It is a little bit of a riff on that idea, but it's really more about a paradigm shift. It's getting us to maybe wrestle with something about our teaching that we haven't had a chance to. It may be to do something that we've always wanted, but we never really got around to it. There's just an endless variety of reasons that we could be looking for a paradigm shift. And I want to contrast that idea of a paradigm shift between what's going on right now due to our sort of adapting to the COVID teaching experience. I think there's an adaptation process for that. It's not an opportunity necessarily for us to rework everything about our courses. While I suspect that some of these things might be occurring during this transition, during the COVID pandemic, I'm actually trying to imagine a space when we are past the COVID pandemic and we are once again allowed to breathe, think differently, and look up in terms of the ways that we think about our teaching. So, oops, sorry. I'm gonna structure this talk around 5 ideas. First, we're going to talk a bit about the value of starting fresh on this process. And then in parentheses are sort of really the action items. We're going to talk about ways that you can develop transformational learning outcomes, apply constructive alignment, and adopt a pedagogical framework so that you then can start building your course. So let's get started. The start fresh idea is sort of this notion of just putting some things away, starting fresh. If you have a bunch of stuff on your whiteboard, erase it. If you often start by designing courses by using old syllabi that you've developed or syllabi that other people have developed, I'm not telling you to shred them or delete them, just put them aside. Put away some of your favorite assignments and teaching strategies or other assessments. Basically, really start to kind of clean slate your course design process. And I will tell you that these things start to try to creep themselves back in, and we're going to try to keep pushing them back throughout the rest of this talk. But it's a really hard thing for us, I think, because we've put so much work into some of these elements of our courses that it seems kind of weird and bizarre to not use them. And I'm not suggesting that we're not going to use them. We're just going to use them later. Okay, so that's why we just need them off to the side. We don't need them right now. Because what I'm really asking you to do in this start fresh idea is not just to build a table, but to build a table and to think about what tables could really be. And sure, it's nice to remember some other tables you might have built or other courses you might have built, but there's certainly something else out there that has a little bit more. It's not just colored. It's not just that it's got different, kinds of wood. It is really a full reimagining of a table of your course. And as I was building this talk, I was thinking about whether or not I'm talking mostly to people that have been teaching for a while. And I decided that that really wasn't the case. I think that a lot of us think we're starting fresh in our early career faculty teaching roles, but we really can't because we've been taking other classes. We have built-in ways that we think about teaching that I also want you to kind of put aside. I want you to sort of dream in sort of like ways that you might not have ever dreamed about the teaching that you're doing with your students and for yourself. It's one of these processes where you have to just sort of look at yourself in the mirror a lot and be like, well, I don't know if you're really doing this. So let's think about these big ideas in teaching that we are trying to accomplish. All right. So the first step is to come up with transformational learning outcomes. And I've obviously forgot the AL up there, but that's okay. We have our first typo of today's keynote. And so transformational learning is an idea that was posited by a couple of researchers back in 2012 as one of the origins that I came across. And, you know, it's an opportunity for you to do these kinds of things with your students, establish a shared vision for a course, provide modeling and mastering experiences, intellectually challenge and encourage your students, personalize the attention and the feedback, create experiential lessons, promote preflection, so thinking about the class before they get there, and reflection, thinking about the class after they get there. I think another idea that kind of emanates from this transformational learning outcomes notion is something that's posited really well by Fink in the taxonomy of significant learning that he proposed in 2013. It blows up learning from being just a cognitive process, but also to be sort of more affective, having a human dimension, caring, and a metacognitive reflection part. When I came across these ideas, I was actually ready for something different in my class. I'm not so sure I knew what it was, but I knew I wanted something different. So I spent a lot of time thinking about these ideas and reflecting on what it is I was trying to accomplish in my course before I sat down to try to write learning outcomes. So today I'm going to ask you to do some of this work in small groups with one or two other people that are on this webinar with us. I want you to spend a few moments thinking about what is missing from your class and what kind of learning do you want your students to really achieve. I mean, this is the kind of learning like in 10 years when you run into them in Walmart or some other store, or like walking down the street in Pittsburgh when we finally get to go there for a real conference, they tell you, oh my goodness, Dr. Hurney, you made me do this, or now I think about these things. So I want you to think about these things, and I want you to go off into a breakout room and talk to one or two people for a few minutes, and then we'll come back out. So think about what transformational learning means to you. And I'm super happy that my assistant, Lindsay, is going to send us off into breakout rooms. Thank you, Lindsay.
Sure. We've had a little bit of shuffling and I want to make sure nobody ends up by themselves. So if you find yourself by yourself in a room, since these are such small groups, I will quickly move you to another one, but I'm going to go ahead and open the room so you can request now.
Lindsay, would you like me to go to a breakout room, or would you prefer I not?
I put all of us in one breakout room. So we didn't actually have to go there, although I'm seeing that some people did go there. Wait a minute, there's a couple people who are.
I think someone just recently joined, so maybe there are.
It doesn't say unassigned though. That's a little funky.
Am I going too fast, Jordan?
No, pacing.
Yeah, let me.
I have a tendency to do that on these Zoom. I feel like I do actually, more than maybe I am. There's something about seeing people's faces that kind of help to temper you and your pace that I'm not looking at everyone's faces right now, so I can't really move on.
How's everything going, Lindsay?
I'm just trying to move around. I've never done this many two-person or any ones that are all two people before. And so it really matters if one of the people does not go into the room. Some of the people here just haven't.
I'm gonna pop into this one just to make sure there are at least two, and if there is not, then I will come back. Or if there are that many, I'll come back.
I'm trying to.
I can hear him talking in the breakout room next. So weird. Fix my typo while people are in there.
Lindsay, I went to my breakout room. Was there a planned move and who was going to be in the breakout room?
What do you mean?
Because the breakout room that I went to had also Melissa and Tyler in it.
Yes, right. Yeah. So maybe you didn't understand what I meant. I put all of us in that breakout room just so that I could get us out of the list.
I got you.
So you're welcome to go hang out in there. I thought, yeah. Sorry, I didn't clarify.
Can you tell them that if they haven't swapped, to make sure that both people have had a chance to share?
Yes. Let me make sure though that she needs to be moved to a different room because somebody didn't come. Okay.
There's still 10 people that haven't gone to any room at all. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, I mean,
On a phone or something. Maybe?
Yeah, some of the people are still here. I've tried to send to give notifications multiple times to different rooms, but
I was in a room, but I was by myself, so I figured
okay.
I'd just pop
Okay.
back.
All right, Chris. So what's missing from your course, Chris?
Yeah.
Tell me.
What isn't missing from my course? Sorry, I'll turn my video on. That's my background picture so that people think I'm listening intently.
It did look that way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
use that for meetings.
Well,
Too much sage on the stage. I do way too much of the sage.
Too
on
much
the
sage on it. So what's missing is the voice of your students.
Yes, especially now.
Lindsay,
In my intro class, I get two show up in person.
this is Leela Gasto, and I was put in a room, but I could hear all of you guys talking and the people in the room talking. So I couldn't make sense of anything.
Weird.
So I left the room and now I'm here.
All right, you're in this group now.
Okay, great.
I don't know about that.
Fine with me.
That's interesting. So yeah, I think that was part of my transformation too, Chris. Was that your name, Chris? Yeah. That I felt like I was doing too much. They were just sitting there taking notes.
Students on Zoom, I have
This
to
is
now
so weird.
call names. The students on Zoom, they just don't say anything.
Wow.
At least in my intro class. Those are all freshmen, but they're not engaged at all.
Well, Lindsay, let's give them another minute and bring them back, okay?
All right.
Given that we're having a few little technical glitches.
Yeah, and it's weird because sometimes I'll see that there's only one person somewhere, even though there should be more than one. It's odd, but all right. So I'm going to go ahead. Should I go ahead and hit the close all rooms thing since that will give them the 60-minute countdown? Great.
And I'll point out as well, I'll be departing in about 10 minutes or so. I'll miss you all while I'm gone, but alas. So Chris, where are you located? Where do you work?
I'm at Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia.
Okay.
Do you know Carol Ploutz?
I sure do.
Yeah, she's one of my best friends from grad school.
No kidding. She
I've been up
retired
there.
a couple of
I
years
worked up
ago.
at Shepherd, yeah,
Yeah.
with the biology department, and yeah.
Oh, she was fantastic. We were
She's
very sorry to
awesome.
see her go.
Yeah, she's having fun down at the beach though. No worries.
I know. I told her I hate her for that.
Yeah. Welcome back. Welcome back. See, everybody's coming back. We got about a few more people that have to come back from their group before I can get started again. Or maybe they left. Is everybody back, Lindsay, from their groups? Nope, nobody's talking to me.
Whoops. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome back. So I think this is now the time where I have to kind of do the big reveal and talk a little bit about my course, because I think it's part of this whole story. So for about 18, 19 years, I was at James Madison University, where I taught non-majors biology to classes that had about 75 or 80 students each term. And I could tell you that pretty much none of them wanted to be in that room with me. And so it was a really interesting endeavor for me to embrace teaching this different and unique population. And so one of the things that I realized that was missing from my course was that I needed to do something that they were interested in. And so I tried a bunch of stuff and, I let them choose topics, and that sort of helped. But I remember one day I was sitting in the classroom when they were taking their final exam, and I'm like, why am I testing non-major biology students on biology content? Why am I doing this? And so this began this process by which I started to really wrestle with the learning outcomes in my course, which came from two sources. I'm sure many of you have other masters, and the other master that I had was the general education program that provided me with these lovely things like use theories and models as unifying principles that McKell's, all of this. You give this to a non-major and they were just like, whatever, I don't know what you're talking about. I thought this was a biology class. All the way down to the ones that I started to develop around the topics that I thought that they would be interested in. And they were interested in cancer. So I had the kind of typical kind of content-based learning outcomes, how exposure to carcinogens can lead to cancer, how to connect ideas related to the causes of cancer with treatments. Okay? But this still was just sort of flat. This isn't what a non-major student needs when they leave my class. I'm not so sure what they need when they leave my class besides a passing grade, but I wanted them to have more than just sort of some base level knowledge of cancer that they probably would forget. Because I remember some of the intro courses that were outside of my major that I don't really remember anything from them. I remember taking them, but I don't really remember much from the intro political science class that I took when I was a freshman. And I certainly put these two learning outcomes, on my syllabus, but I don't think I really did anything. Of course, I want them to be able to evaluate the credibility of sources, but I wasn't really owning it. So this transformational process for me resulted in the development of 4 shorter, but also written for the students, for the most part, learning outcomes that really started to reflect what I wanted them to do. I wanted them to be able to answer biology questions. So I wanted them to construct their own answers as accurate as possible to biological questions. Somewhere in here, there was some stuff in the gen ed thing about understanding the difference between science and pseudoscience. And who knew that I was preparing them for the 2020 election? But I certainly am. And hopefully I can get a few emails from them indicating that they were like, oh, now we know the difference between science and pseudoscience. I also think it's real important, especially for non-majors, to do what one of the gen ed outcomes was trying to articulate, maybe not in a very good way, but one that I kind of borrowed. So illustrating the interdependence between biology and social and ethical issues. Like these people are going to end up on town boards. They're going to, be in the school board. They're going to raise children. They're going to have jobs in all sectors of society. And I want them to understand how biology can oftentimes get ahead of society and ethical issues. I want them to really think about those things. And I want them to be able to evaluate the credibility of sources. And I'm telling you right now, my lecture-based blah, blah, blah about cancer or infectious diseases or whatever other topic I picked that they thought was going to be interesting was not doing that. But at least I started to have a goal. So when I came up with these, I didn't immediately change my course. I just started to think, okay, how can I start moving my course in that direction? So that was step 1. You have to have a sense of this larger goal in terms of the learning that you're wanting to achieve with your course. And of course, this holds true in the literature. There's a lot of good SOTL out there about the role that learning outcomes can play in higher education teaching. So if you're sort of a little bit reticent as to whether or not you should have learning outcomes or the role they might play in your course, there's certainly a breadcrumb trail there that indicates that using learning outcomes can actually change the way that students think about courses, change the way they think about the way they should prepare for courses or for class, and the kinds of things that they do while they're in your course. And so step one, come up with transformational learning outcomes that reflect the kind of learning you want in your class. And that may mean just trashing everything you've already developed or modifying some of the things that you still think are most important that you've had on your syllabus before. So, right, it's time for our syllabus. Can we work on our syllabus now? This is what all my faculty asked me after we start doing this learning outcome stuff in a course design institute. And I'm like, yeah, no. Now, the problem with the course design institute is I can't stop them from pulling out their syllabus. The syllabus for faculty is like the phone. I want them to put it away, but sometimes they hide it under the desk and they're still secretly working on it, even though I want them to move on. It's okay. We're getting there, but no, it's not syllabus time yet. Well, what time is it? Well, it's time for us to start applying constructive alignment. And this is a fancy way of saying backward course design, but I like it better because it actually embodies something a little bit more than just having everything lined up, which we'll talk about in a second. It really is a way of creating a course that allows students through the learning experiences, and BIGS defines learning experiences, both the learning activities and the assessments that you use to assess those learning outcomes that we just talked about, objectives, outcomes, goals. I'm not even going to go there. Just use whatever word makes you happy. Okay. So constructive alignment is this notion that everything that we do should help the students construct their own meaning through the experiences that we provide them, right? And that things are aligned. So I suspect if you've been to any kind of course design experience or read anything about backward design, you've seen a diagram that looks more like this, where there's the learning outcomes that then lead to the assessment methods that you will use to assess these learning outcomes, that will then lead to the activities that you do so that they do well on the assessments, and so you can get the desired learning outcomes that you want. And of course, the other arrow that faculty want in there is the syllabus. Like, when do we get to work on the syllabus? Not yet, okay? And I think that these three terms in and of themselves are okay, but I prefer to think about these three items in these phrases. Like, what are the desired results? What's acceptable evidence? So if you were trying to be convinced that a student actually achieved a learning outcome, what would they have to show to you? What would they have to do to convince you, like, yep, you can accurately answer a biological question? So that's the way we want to start thinking about this. We don't want to start saying, oh, I have some assessments, let me plug them in. We can, but because some of them might actually be acceptable, but mine weren't, because all I was giving were exams. And all the exams were testing was their understanding of whatever cancer biology I had taught them, or whatever biology about, infectious diseases was a topic that they were interested in, drug addiction, and things like that, right? And then finally, and we're not going to get there quite yet, there's how do you actually make this happen? So, but let's stop and think first about this acceptable evidence piece. Okay? So, what kinds of assessments will reveal whether students have achieved the learning outcomes in your courses? And so I think maybe that breakout room thing didn't work so well with 2 people. Can we try it again with more? Lindsay, would be easier, right?
Yes, obviously it'll be different sets of people.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right,
Go for larger groups because some people are in rooms by themselves. And I want you to think about this question as we make the Zoom transformation into the breakout rooms. What kinds of assessments, in other words, what can students provide to you that would be acceptable evidence that they have learned the outcomes that you have for your course, or they've achieved those outcomes? Thank you, Lindsay.
There still may be a few 2-person ones.
That's fine. That's good. But at least there won't be any one solo.
Hopefully not.
And there they go.
Okay. The rooms are opening now.
But people are still coming into the waiting room.
Yeah.
I keep reminding myself this, if this was in a big hall, people would be coming in and out the whole time.
That's true.
What happens?
A couple people I need to maybe reassign. Let's see. Oh, Aaron's by himself. That won't work.
So where, I'm trying to read where are you? Do you watch, where do you work, Lindsay?
Oh, so the thing that's on the screen is just our
Yeah,
logo
I just
for
realized
this.
it.
Yeah. So I'm at Appalachian State University in Western North Carolina. And I'm an associate professor of psych there, but I'm also the assistant director for our CTL.
Nice.
So I was writing down, I mean, like, obviously I know this stuff, but I like but we're wrestling with backward design as our primary model for course design and yada, yada. The reason we're wrestling with it has more to do with its kind of silence on minoritized populations and how meaning is constructed by those in power. So we're trying to create our own thing. So I was scribbling down your Biggs reference because I was like, oh, I wonder if that would be a better thing for us to work with.
Well, and I think the next thing that I'm going to talk about is sort of thinking, instead of activities, going right into like, what am I going to do each day in class? I think that there's a step missing here, which is to think about some pedagogical frameworks.
Yeah.
Theories that inform how we actually start to put everything together. Because otherwise it's just still, in my mind, kind of disjointed. So
right.
Over the summer, I've been doing some work with Bates and Bowden, and some of them presented on like pedagogies of care or trauma informed, but the big picture of it, like how do we wrap our heads around culturally responsive teaching,
right,
and use that to, I mean, clearly we can think about the learning outcomes and assessment from those lenses, but most certainly the activities need to sort of have some context, or else it's just like a bunch of laundry hanging on the line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the exact space we are too. We're wrestling with trying to figure out the right kind of framework or model. Because honestly, a lot of our course redesign institutes and things have stopped short of the like, okay, what does day-to-day look like? And we've done that on purpose because we don't want people to jump there too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They will. They go there. They go there
Mhm.
every time.
Yeah, and then with this emergency stuff, we kind of just indulged that, to be honest, because we were like, you know what? Actually, letting professors plan out their day-to-day is probably trauma-focused pedagogy from us to them. You know, like letting them grab onto something that was concrete. So yeah, it's been interesting for sure. Do you want me to send any messages to them or?
No, I think they're good.
All right, cool.
Probably. God knows what they're talking about in there. So that's the one thing I miss about face-to-face instruction, is I can pretty much tell whether they're on task. And it's not just faculty, students as well. You can tell when they've stopped talking about class. Something about their body language changes, I think. Active learning activity.
The closest analog I've had to that is the whole having them put evidence of their work in a Google slide, because then I can watch and see whose cursors are still moving and whose cursors aren't. And then I can, add a comment or be like, hey, what y'all talking about?
That is a good idea. I've seen that happen. I've seen people using that. It's good stuff. I'll give them, let's give them a little more time. I'm way good in terms of, I tried to not overpack. And I wanted the message simple and straightforward.
It's generally pretty good for a keynote.
So how are things on your campus? Are you guys back?
Yeah, so you mean like for fall?
No, you like doing like in-person instruction?
Well, so basically people could choose their format, and even after they chose their format, it seems like a lot of people never actually did the thing they chose. So if somebody picked face-to-face, a lot of people still have never gone face-to-face, and we've been back since mid-August. But I mean, I don't know if you followed any of the national news, but App State did just make the news last week because we had a student death from COVID.
Oh no. I did notice that, but I don't think I remembered which.
Yeah, it was ours. Yeah, so, and of course the chancellor hasn't made any changes to operations, no change to courses, no changes to sports or dorms or, yeah. So the party line is that all of this transmission is happening at off-campus parties. Literally, yeah. So, yeah. And even at this point, it's saying we're going to go all remote. It's almost all remote already anyways. And there's no evidence of classroom transmission. So many people are teaching outside if they're teaching face-to-face. So,
Right.
yeah, it's been interesting. Last week was tough trying to get together trauma-informed pedagogy stuff to send that out because the chancellor's messages had literally no flavor of that. And so we had to jump in really quickly and fill that hole.
It's rough. It's rough.
Mhm. It is.
All right, why don't you call him back?
All right. All right.
I won't do any more. This will be my last one.
Oh, you want, so you don't need me to add another one after this? You'll do?
Yeah, I think
Cool.
we'll be fine. Yeah.
All right. That means I can take better notes on your content now.
Welcome back. Welcome back. If we were live, I would love to hear some of your ideas. In fact, feel free to type some stuff that you talked about into the chat. It'd be great for us to see. I won't be able to monitor it, but it would be great for me to see the kinds of things you're talking about. So as you're coming back, please feel free to add some ideas of things you talked about into the chat. The mouse is always so weird when I'm on Zoom. Welcome back, welcome back. If you're feeling compelled, please pop some ideas about what you talked about into the chat of assessments that reveal whether students have achieved the learning outcomes. Are we all back, Lindsay? Looking close, huh? So, yeah, thank you for, entertaining some brief, but hopefully interesting conversations in your breakout room. I think for my process, when I started to revise what it was I really wanted them to achieve in the learning outcomes, it became amazingly clear to me that having them take tests was not going to do that. And I think I got stuck there for a long time. And I got stuck there for a long time because I had 75 students. If I had 4, I think I would have jumped over that hurdle pretty quickly, because I would have been able to create like independent studies for each of my 4 students. Or even if I had a class of 20, it would have seemed more doable. But I had 75 students that would show up every class period and look at me like, please teach me biology so I can go home and memorize it and come back and take a multiple choice test. So it wasn't just the number of students that I had, it was the mindset that those students had about the kind of class that I was teaching. And it was also the realization that, whatever phase career you're in, you don't want your whole life to be grading. So I couldn't come up with a way of thinking about this where I wasn't spending like a ridiculous amount of time grading. Now, it is worth noting that I did spend a ridiculous amount of time grading exams because I couldn't help myself and I didn't give completely multiple choice exams. And so I was doing a little bit of grading. I just wasn't, sort of doing the level that you might need for them to be writing papers about biology and for them to be talking to me about sources that they had found, right? So when I started to think about my learning outcomes, I really had this gap. It seems pretty short here, but to me it was the Grand Canyon. How do I create assessment strategies that allow me insights into these 4 learning outcomes without just sort of basically, discounting every other aspect of my life, right? Where I'm like literally doing nothing else except for assigning things, grading them, and giving them feedback. So what I did instead of letting that roadblock win is I decided, let's just imagine what it would look like if I didn't have that roadblock. And what I came up with were 4 new assignments that I had never used in these formats before. I decided that I had to have some assignments where they answered biology questions. If that's the learning outcome, they have to do it. And I went to a workshop on digital storytelling, and the workshop kind of inspired me that I could use digital media as a way for them to do that. So that's a whole other talk. I'm happy to talk to you about it and show you some of the stuff that I've done there. But that seemed like good alignment, right? I want them to answer biological questions. And so I created these BBQs, these beautiful biological question assignments, and they would answer them by creating these digital media posts. I also knew that I needed individuals to be part of the process of looking up sources and giving me their sense of the reliability of the source as they were looking for information about biology, whatever the question was. So one of the questions that we would answer is, how does stem cells influence, drug therapies? And so they would have to find out what a stem cell was, how do they use it in drug therapy? They would look up all this stuff and they'd focus on the biology of it. Each week, a student, well, let's not get into what happened each week, but these individual assignments assured me that each student in my class would be processing some of this information and thinking about it. I think I just knew innately that if I was going to pull this off in any meaningful way, I was going to have some groups or teams. So drawing a lot on the team-based learning literature, I decided that there needed to be some assignments where the teams were processing all of this research. So if they're doing research on what is a stem cell, I want the individual to process it. I also want them to process it in a group. And then I want them to be constantly talking to me about the reliability of their sources. So literally every assignment that they passed in had a short kind of attachment to it. That was their reliability statement, where they talked to me about the role that the author played in reliability, the publication source, the format, the use of other peer-reviewed sources, things like that. So I thought, okay, here's the evidence that would convince me that they were doing these things, that they were answering biological questions. If I pose questions about science and pseudoscience, I could get at this learning outcome. If I integrated into these beautiful biological questions aspects of society and ethics, like we did one on whether or not we should spray the local county with pesticides, and would that have a negative, are there any ethical issues involved in that, or social issues? Are tourists going to think better or worse of us because we're spraying all these pesticides everywhere? And then the onslaught and the just sort of iterability, and then just over and over again, so much so that they were just like screaming at me, enough reliability statements, Dr. Hurney. I'm like, no, we're going to keep doing them, because I wanted to remind them that determining the credibility of a source is not simple. Right? So I've got the two pieces. I've got my learning outcomes and I got my assessment. And as we've been doing for my other segment, there is tons of literature here about how the constructive alignment part, again, impacts the ways that students approach learning. Students will approach learning in this class far differently than they would in a course where I'm just listing a bunch of content knowledge that they need to know. Not to say that that's not important, because I wanted them to learn content, and I don't want any of you to think that I don't think your content is important, but I suspect just memorizing your content isn't really what you're after. You're after not just the table, but the table, not just any table, right? All right, so time for the syllabus? No, it's not time for the syllabus yet. Sorry, we're getting there. We're getting closer. All right, so the last bit in the constructive alignment process, the backward design process, is for you to start to select activities. But before you do that, I'm going to challenge you to adopt a pedagogical framework. There's a bunch of them out there. There are books on them. In fact, this one that I use all the time, Learner-Centered Teaching, speaks to me in ways that I just no others do. And it just really kind of gets at the heart of the way that I think about teaching. And when I first read this book, I thought the whole book was going to be about me. I thought, I'm like, oh, I'm using clickers and I got like small groups and I'm doing all this cool stuff. And I thought, oh, I'm learning centered. No, I'm not, because I do everything. I engage in the core content. I make connections. I act as their guide. I mean, I acted as the content dispenser. I was responsible for their learning. I'm the one that stayed up nights worrying if they were going to pass or not. I don't think they were worrying about it nearly as much as I was. And I created all the assessment tools, mostly to give them grades, not necessarily to gauge their learning. So when I really started to look at this particular framework, and read it and over again, think about it. And going back to what it is I was trying to accomplish, these outcomes with this acceptable evidence, I began to realize that the way that I research and the way that I prepare for a lecture, if I could get them to do that, if I could shift the seat of power to a certain extent, so that my students were now doing the things that I was doing to learn about cancer and to learn about things in biology that I didn't really know about, because I studied like little tiny molecules of RNA. I don't really know anything about cancer per se, but I'm smart enough to figure it out. So by really immersing myself in this pedagogical framework, I began to realize that I needed to help my students achieve the learning outcomes by thinking about the behaviors I wanted them to engage in. So this is what I really wanted them to be able to do, right? Wouldn't this be great? Like, I wanted them to read about biology. I wanted them to select the content they find interesting. I wanted them to organize and synthesize the content. And then I wanted them to read more. And then I wanted them to tell other people, like, oh my gosh, all this cool stuff that I just learned. I just learned this way cool stuff about biology. And then I wanted them to say, hey, Dr. Hurney, I learned this about stem cells. What do you think? How am I getting it? Does this sound good to you? Is there something missing? And I wanted them to get feedback. And then I wanted to tell them more people. I mean, this is what happens when you really want to know something. You just go for it. And I was doing all of that. I was reading about biology. I was selecting the content. I was organizing things. I was doing all of these things. So the immersion into the pedagogical framework offered me this opportunity to think about the learning behaviors I wanted my students to engage in. And I should have known this because I actually wrote a paper about it back in 2012, where I talked about the value of the students having choice over aspects of their learning environment. But I was still trapped in this model that was being driven by the number of students that were in my class, as opposed to this aspirational learning that I was trying to achieve. So again, look at the SOTL in different ways. Don't look as it for solutions, just solutions. Look at it for inspiration of ways of thinking differently about your course, the outcomes, the assessments, and the behaviors, because it all is about behavior. So once you have your behaviors, then you can start thinking about activities. So we're almost there. Are we at the syllabus yet? Not quite, because now is the time where you need to gather all your tools. You want to get all your favorite books. You want to get all the notes from all the conferences you ever went to that had really cool teaching ideas. You want to talk to all your friends that are doing this, using this whirligig tool or this technology, this or that, whatever. You want to talk to other people that teach courses like you, people that teach big courses, people that teach big courses outside of your discipline, people that teach small classes. You, in fact, didn't realize it, but you want to be a CTL director, because that is what I've been able to do for like the past 10 years, is listen to people talk about all the crazy ways that they teach teaching. They teach their courses, the crazy inspirational ways. It's just like, it's amazing what you all are doing. And what I'm asking you to do is put it into this larger context. Think about a framework, think about aspirational learning outcomes and evidence that convinces you that they're making progress towards these outcomes. Because then you can start to build your course. You can actually start to put together all the little elements. So if you've never seen a castle top diagram, this is a way that I build my courses once I'm ready for this, where I map out the days of the week. And I know this is just like, doesn't work right now because we have asynchronous and synchronous and it's all kind of weird. But imagine when we had the days of the week and there were out of class days and in class days. And this is where I would have them, sort of finish their individual process assignments. They'd come in to class on Tuesday. They'd all done that work. They would then process things as their team. In class on Thursday, they would start to work on their answer to the biological question that we were posing. And they would post that by the end of the week so that I could grade it. So I was grading post by team each week. And then I would assign the individual research assignment for the next week. And the whole thing would start over. And I probably should just let you know that Monday was a big grading day for me. But when I added up the number of hours that I spent grading on Mondays and compared it to the number of hours I spent grading exams in my previous life, it's about the same. It was just dosed across more weeks as opposed to just being like 3 or 4 exams that I graded. So once you have your pedagogical strategy and you get all your friends in the room and all your tools and the gadgets that connect things and your favorite book or somebody else's favorite book, build your course thinking about all of those things that make a course a transformative experience, all of those ideas that you have been carrying around with you in your heart, that you've been trying to accomplish in your courses. You can do this. This is in you. And yes, now it's syllabus time. Now you can go and write about this holistic view of your course and lay it out for your students in a way that it's intentional, it's thoughtful, it now reflects big teaching. It's got a lot of small teaching elements in it. It's got a lot of little whirligigs and attachments, but now it is yours. It is your version of looking up and trying to achieve a kind of learning and a kind of teaching that you've been wanting to for however long you've been at this work. So I thank you all, and I'm so happy that you've been able to attend this session. Here's a list of the references. I'm sure that I'll be sending these slides along to everyone on the team. And again, I thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions if that is an appropriate thing to do, Lindsay. I don't know how we're rolling here.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, so we still have 9 minutes before the session is officially over. So it seems like we shouldn't just say goodbye. It seems like we should take some questions while we have your brain here. If anybody has questions they want to put in the chat, or if you want to use the raise hand feature, I can try to scan for those. Let's see in the chat from Leslie, how do students like this process, Carol?
So when I first tried this, I've done this, I taught the course in this new transformed way about, I think 4 times before I ended up taking this job at Colby. And I think the first time through, it was a disaster. I won't sugarcoat it. And it was partly a disaster because we got a lot of snow that year. So we had like 4 snow days. So I think any course that I taught that term would have been a disaster. But I think the mistake, so what did end up happening was I had, my course evaluations were the, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And the, oh my God, you should never let this professor teach a class ever again, right? So of course I can now tell you the trick. The trick is to explain and explain and explain and be transparent. And here's why we're doing this. And here's why we're doing this. And here's why we're doing this. I think in the end of the day, the students that didn't like it weren't like, like foaming at the mouth necessarily, but I do think that there was a lot of kind of love and hate. Over the next 3 times that I taught it, I smoothed out all of that. I made sure that I was much more transparent about the ways things were working. They were like, you're not presenting information to us. I'm like, but I am giving you feedback. So let's talk about feedback. By the last time that I taught it, I really like, it's the one thing I miss about my new job is that I don't get to teach this class anymore. And they would let me, I just don't have the bandwidth to do it every term, given my new role. So I think when you make any kind of large pedagogical shift, as the literature suggests, you're going to take a little bit of a dip in your evals, but then they rebounded to being higher than they ever were. And it was just so much more satisfying. I would walk around campus, and this was at James Madison University, like 20,000 students, and students would come up to me and be like, hey, Dr. Hurney, did you read that article about colony collapse disorder in the something paper? Because we did a unit on colony collapse disorder. And they remembered, I mean, this is like a history major coming up to me in the dining hall. I'm like, this was not happening in the previous version of my class. So for me, it was also an opportunity to learn different aspects of biology that I didn't have to prep because they were doing all the prep. So we would read, I'd have them read some like biology news articles, and they'd pick which one they thought was interesting. And then we would develop some questions around it. And yeah, my prep was way different. It was just sort of getting the space ready for them to do their work. So yeah, I can't even imagine teaching it the other way now.
I see in the chat a couple that are related. So I think the kind of organizing question is, what do you see big teaching as during COVID? And a connected question would be, how do you feel about assigning group work during COVID? I've done it before, but this seems challenging right now.
Yeah, I think big teaching, asking you to really embrace big teaching during COVID seems like not a nice thing for me to put out there necessarily. However, I think that what's happening during COVID is a lot of really amazing silver linings, a lot of little tools. So if you're thinking about tools that you might want to apply to your big teaching process, I was just talking to a group of students earlier in a mid-semester feedback session, and they were like, who knew that having these videos of class would be so helpful? Right? So all these classes that are creating videos of lectures or mini lectures or like flipped classroom lectures, the students are beginning to realize like, oh, that's a much better way to prep for class than the ways that they were doing it before. So I would say that the way we go about this during COVID is, I think, to not lose sight that we want to just gather more things that appeal to us that we think we might be able to apply to a larger course design process. And then when the time comes and you get to engage in a course design process, which by the way, you cannot do by yourself. You at least need one like-minded friend to do this with you. You need someone else to be like, yeah, no, that's not acceptable evidence. I'm not going with you there. You got to convince me that it's acceptable evidence. So yeah, I think that's what COVID for me means right now in terms of teaching. The group work in COVID, I think it actually still is working really well in the classes that I've seen that people are using it. I think the breakout room feature, especially if you really think about the ways that you design it, can be really smart. And I never just let them go into random groups. I'm really thoughtful about creating the teams. I look at the literature on team-based learning a lot and think about the ways that the groups are formed. So, you know, you'll know better whether or not you want to put a bunch of people, students that might be remote versus students that are in person, or whether you want to mix that. But I think Zoom lets them interact in ways that maybe they hadn't even thought of. Maybe that is the silver lining. You don't have to actually go to the library to work in your group.
All right, we have two that are pertaining to these student behaviors, the learning behaviors.
Yeah.
So I'll say both of them from Jessie Hill. We have a question of how do you communicate those student behaviors to the students, or do you even? And then also related to that, how do you translate those behaviors then to your course flow chart, where the students selecting topics to investigate and their individual assignments, and did they then teach it to their peers?
Yeah.
So
I'll bring the picture back because it does help me tell the story. So yeah, you know, I do communicate this to my students. I don't communicate it in a list, like these are the behaviors you're going to engage in during class. I kind of write it up in more of like a syllabus promise, you know, my invitation to learn. You know, these are the things you'll be doing. You'll be reading about biology. You'll be sharing ideas with me and with your student peers, you know, kind of wrap it into the narrative around the course. And really the idea, and I probably did a really poor job of making these connections, so thank you for forcing me to point it out much more clearly, is that every part of this design was about making sure that students were engaging in those behaviors. So the individual process assignment sent them out to read things, either things that I told them to read or that they would find on their own. So they're reading. The individual process assignment also has that reliability component. So they're telling me how reliable their sources are. They're getting my feedback because I'm grading all of those every Monday. And you might think, what a nutcase, 75 of those every Monday. They're not super long and it didn't take that much. I got really good at it, by the way. And as the semester went on, I didn't really need to because they were getting better and better and better and better at it. Every week they're doing this, right? This is not just once. They just get so much better at it. So they get my feedback on Monday, and then when they go into class on Tuesday, they share feedback with each other. And part of the grade for their work for each week is whether or not they've addressed the feedback I've given them. So they can't just discount it because they get a big oval in that part of the you know, grade for their team post. So the whole thing's really integrated. So during Tuesday, I might challenge them to find more sources, so they have to go out and read more. So I was actually really quite intentional. You know, I think I would love for their student behavior also to be like to tell their mom and dad stuff, but I don't know if I could build that into their talk to someone in your family about this. I mean, I would love to get emails from family that told me, you know, my son, who is like a religious studies major, was emailing me about stem cells and telling me all the stuff he's learning. I'd be like, oh my God, win. So hope that helps.
We only have one more minute, but we also only have one more statement in the chat. it's more of a request maybe than a question or possibly a comment, but from Victor Benassi, he's saying, please discuss the importance of linking learning activities to learning outcomes. For example, if you want students to learn and recall facts, then you should be using practice quizzing. You want students to be able to solve well-defined problems, then you should use worked examples.
Totally. And I think when you get back here, you know, you want to really start to, like, the activities that you do, you want to really merge that together and get those assessments, to link up with the activities that you select, so that they are actually, you know, that you are, you know, and the other part that I didn't really have time to sort of really expand on is how to blow up some of these learning outcomes so that you can get to some of the retrieval and the practice and the elaborative types of learning activities. So yeah, thank you. And hello, Victor. Nice to hear from you.
We are at 2, and you can see that some people have already left. I don't know if there is one remaining question in the chat. I want to respect your time though, Carol. Okay, last question is, did you find that your way of encouraging them how to learn carried over into other classes? Prepping for other courses, learning patterns, is that something you had gotten feedback on? Does it generalize?
Yeah, I did. I started to use it in my intro bio for majors course and my lab course for bio majors. I realized that they weren't engaging in the kind of behaviors I wanted them to engage in before lab. So I had to think about, okay, what are those behaviors and how do I design the prep to get them to do those things? It's almost like once you start backward designing, you backward design everything. And once I started to think about these ideas as I'm framing as big teaching, it just, I think people are just like, okay, we get it, Carol. Yeah. That's all you can talk about.
All righty. Well, I think we've come to the end there. Thank you so very much, Carol. That was a wonderful, you know, big thinking kind of presentation, which I think we all can definitely benefit from. And that although we're handling a lot with COVID right now, it also does present an opportunity to really kind of blow up some of the things that you were doing or had accepted as being needed components. Maybe they're not. Maybe we start fresh. So thank you so very much for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Right. Bye, everybody. Hopefully we'll see some of you tonight at the Drink and Discuss. We had a great time yesterday, and we're going to keep that up tonight, play a little trivia, and talk a little bit about, I think today's diversity, equity, and inclusion in psychology with Marianne Lloyd, who is in here right now. Hey! So see some of you guys tonight at happy hour time.